All right, the second video of Unit 2 is on Greek mythology and on the Greek gods, some of the coolest stuff out there. And of course, remember that the Greeks were polytheistic, all right? And each of their gods represented natural forces. So that's not anything that was really new, as we've talked about already in some of the earlier units. So one important thing to remember, though, is that mythology and those gods played a huge role on Western culture. The words we use, the stories we tell, all have their roots in Greek mythology and Greek religion. Okay, enjoy the video.
This is the Unit 2 Part 2 video on Greek religions that I told you about, and we're going to get started here talking about Greek religion and mythology. All right, we want to talk about, again, the geography will play a certain role in it, but mainly we're going to talk about how Greek mythology and religion have impacted Western culture. They're not only a part of our own entertainment, but they're also part of our language, and the literature that we have created here have huge influences from Greek mythology and religion. Okay, so first up, we're going to talk about, again, the Acropolis, which was usually a hilltop but that had a temple in each Greek city-state. Almost every Greek city-state, while knowing that Zeus was the chief god, still had their own patron god or goddess that they sort of ascribed to the most. And there was usually a temple built for them in the center of the city. Okay, so first we're going to talk about the era known as the Dark Ages. Remember that when we last left off that the Mycenaeans had been conquered by a group known as the Dorians. And the Dorians did not have reading and writing. So for the next 300 years after the Dorian invasion, there was no reading and writing. But stories were still passed on through singing storytellers known as bards. And of course the most famous of these bards was a supposedly blind storyteller named Homer, who created two famous works of Greek literature, the Iliad and the Odyssey. And so they're sort of the basis of Greek culture and mythology. And of course you got Homer.
The internet, is that thing still around?
Of course, probably not the right Homer, but it's a good way to remember it. Okay, so let's talk about the Iliad and the Odyssey. The Iliad is a story of the Trojan War and how a prince of the city of Troy named Paris falls in love with a beautiful but already married woman named Helen, supposedly so beautiful that her face could launch 1,000 ships. They would go to war over her. And of course, to make a long story short, the war, which goes on for 10 years and has many incredible characters in it, like Achilles and Odysseus and Agamemnon and Paris and Hector and all those guys. And if you've seen the movie with Brad Pitt, it's sort of loosely based on the Iliad. And of course it's all decided at the end when the Greeks hide inside of the Trojan horse and then come out and surprise the city of Troy and take it over. Now, the second story is the Odyssey, and it's about the king of Ithaca, Odysseus, who goes to fight in the Trojan War, and he offends the gods, and it takes him 10 years to get back home. And so he goes through many, many different adventures to get there. He has to deal with the sirens, and he has to deal with the witch Circes, and Charybdis, the whirlpool, and all kinds of stuff. And we'll talk about more about that in class as we get to our Greek God project. Okay, now one of the things that I want you to understand that comes from these Greek stories is an ideal called arete. The Greeks believed that you had to have courage and honor in everything that you did. And that meant that they placed a great deal of worth on the individual. They believed that every person should try to be the best that they could be. And they felt very, very strongly about personal respect and personal morality. Now, some of the things that they accepted, many of us in our culture may not accept. But the bottom line is that the Greeks still felt very strongly about each person having self-respect and respect for others and their own personal moral code, which sort of, reigned all the way through most of their city-states. Okay, so how about those Greek gods? Let's talk about them. First off, the Greeks' gods were human-like in form, but they lived on Mount Olympus, at least the main gods of the Greek world when we get to this point. And just like humans, they got jealous, they got angry, they quarreled, they married, and the Greeks created myths about these gods that explained events in nature. Each of the Greek gods typically represented a natural force as well. Alright, so let's talk about the specific Greek gods. Of course, we're going to focus primarily on the Olympians and a certain number of those. And of course, we're going to start at the top. The chief god for the Greeks was Zeus, the god of thunder and lightning. And Zeus lived up to that moniker because he was a lot of flash and noise. Zeus was, of course, involved with many different goddesses and many different human women and had offspring everywhere. So Zeus certainly lived up to the Greek mantra of being a male or paternalistic society, and certainly was staying busy. Zeus's wife, as you can imagine, was often jealous because Zeus was always hanging out with some other women. And Hera became the goddess of marriage and virginity. Her symbols were the lotus staff and the cuckoo bird. And she is often portrayed in Greek mythology as being jealous of Zeus. Of course, she was also, prominent for being a head of a household. And so many of the females of Greece, adored Hera. Hades, who was Zeus's brother, got the underworld. And of course, I think he sort of got a bad deal there, but that's what he did. And he ruled with Cerberus, the three-headed dog, and he had a key to the underworld and a helmet of invisibility. Apollo was the god of light, and Apollo was also the god of music and art and some wonderful things like that. And I'll show you some pictures of all the gods after I go through the Greek festivals and some of those things here in just a minute. But I just wanted to let you know that he was also the twin of Artemis, who was the goddess of the hunt, and of course she is symbolized by the deer or the stag and the bow and arrow. She was also the goddess of fertility, and she was the goddess of sudden death, that arrow through the heart thing. Apollo once tricked her into killing her own lover by having a contest to see who could shoot a target from the farthest with their bow and arrow. And of course, she was not very happy about that. All right, Aphrodite, the beautiful goddess of, beauty, and love and those type of things. And of course, all the Greeks, when they were in love, they, prayed to Aphrodite to, help them out. And then Athena, who is one of my favorite goddesses. Not only was she the chief goddess for Athens, who held a festival in her honor and built the Parthenon in honor of her, but she supposedly popped right out of Zeus's head, which I think is really, really cool. She was also a goddess of war. She was a goddess of wisdom and womanly goodness. She was really the goddess of all kinds of things, including justice. She was symbolized by the owl and for that wisdom. Now, the last god that we're going to talk about is Poseidon, god of the sea. He, of course, was also Zeus's brother. Zeus got the sky, Hades got the underworld, bad deal. Poseidon got the god of the sea. Now, I think he was also god of horses and bulls and stuff like that. He helped create Aphrodite out of sea foam, of all things. So, check out all the great Greek mythology, and we'll get more in-depth with the gods as we do our Greek God project. All right, there are a couple of Greek festivals that I want you to know about. And the first is the Olympic Games. Remember that beyond all things, the Olympic Games were a religious festival held in honor of Zeus. And they were held in Olympia every 4 years, and that's where they get the name Olympic Games. The first Olympic Games only had one race, so you can imagine if you were late. Hey, I'm here for the Olympic Games, and say, oh dude, you just missed it. So, but later on they added more events, And they would do all kinds of other stuff besides just athletics. They would decorate Zeus's statue with a gold robe, and they would sacrifice hundreds of bulls. So while the people enjoyed the games, I don't think the bulls did near as much. Alright, a festival that I do want to talk to you about is the festival of Dionysus. Now, Dionysus was the god of wine and ecstasy. Now, tell me that's not a dangerous combination. Now, the followers of Dionysus would go into the woods, and they were women, and they would dance with each other and sing and have a good time, sort of like a campout. But men couldn't stand this, that women were going off on their own, so they made up all these crazy stories about what was going on. And so eventually the festival moves back into the city-states. And Athens in particular would always have a playwriting competition. And this is the start of drama in ancient Greece. And not just the drama between the people, you know, acting. Alright, one other festival that I need you to know about is like the oracles. Probably the most famous was the Oracle of Delphi. And what happened was the Greek people believed that the gods would speak through different means and speak through the priests and priestesses at the places where the oracles were. And what they would do is get a teenage girl and basically drug her with hallucinogenic drugs and alcohol and ask her questions like, should we go to war? You know, isn't that what you always do? You know, get a drugged up teenage girl to decide whether you're going to go to war or not. Okay, so that would be some of the things that would happen with the oracle. You know, really weird stuff. Alright, so I hope that you've enjoyed this video on the mythology. I'm going to show you some of the Greek gods before we finish up and let you hear their thing. But before we do that, make sure that you fill in your notes and talk about the influence of Greek culture on our movies and athletics in the box to the left. Alright, Zeus, god of lightning and thunder. Yeah, what would you expect? Grand entrance, right? Hera, Zeus's wife, the goddess of marriage. I was all against that whole marriage thing, you know, but then I got married.
This sort of thing ain't my bag, baby.
She got me.
This sort of thing ain't my bag, baby.
Again. Okay. Hades, god of the underworld. Except if Hades was dealing with you, you were dead. Alright. Apollo, the god of light and music and art. Exactly. Okay, here's Artemis. An armed woman, right? Run away. It's all kisses for Aphrodite. Athenas, the goddess of wisdom, war, arts, justice, women. Goes, wow.
No, that sounds pretty sweet to me.
I agree. Yeah, that Poseidon was one bad dude. Alright, man, I hope you enjoyed the video, and keep up with your notes and your journals. Alright, so what are the big ideas for this video? Number one, the Greeks were polytheistic, and their gods represented natural forces. The second big idea is that Greek mythology had a large impact on Western culture in art, language, and architecture. Okay, thanks for watching. Please keep up with your notes in your journal.